If you've played a lot of racing games, chances are you'll have racked up more miles than a marathon sprinter. I don't just mean by number of laps, but by locations visited. Most racing games, especially of the sim variety, share a lot of real-life racetracks scattered across the globe. These are tracks like Laguna Seca, Monza, Tsukuba, or Daytona. But in order to stand out from the competition and maybe flex some graphical muscle, some developers crafted tracks that are very unlikely to exist in our world. However, fictional tracks can sometimes be rooted in reality. Ahoy there! If any racing game wants to stand out from the pack, racetracks with memorable backdrops go a long way. Like I mentioned, developers will often create fictional tracks that have no potential to exist in reality to show off their graphics. The old version of Grand Valley from the Gran Turismo series is a prime example, with its light blue bridge connecting between two halves of the valley overlooking the sea. But sometimes a track with a fictional layout can still be set in a plausible area. Going back to Grand Valley, the track received a rather controversial overhaul in Gran Turismo 7 that caused the removal of the iconic blue bridge. But with Gran Turismo priding itself on being the real driving simulator, the redesign took inspiration from a real-life locale with the track now set along California's Big Sur Coast Highway, using some of the roadway's landmarks in its construction. So I thought it'd be an interesting topic to talk about. We're going to look at some fictional racetracks in racing games and compare them to the real-world locales they're based on. I won't be talking about every incarnation of one location in games. For example, I'm not talking about the many permutations of New York, the F1 circuit in Las Vegas, or the different street circuits in Chicago, like the Airstrip and NFS Pro Street, or the NASCAR circuit. I'm putting an emphasis on real roads that have yet to be made into courses. I also won't be going over mashup maps, which are inspired by real life but have multiple inspirations mixed in to make a completely original map. That means no Rockport, no Bayview, no Ridge City, and no Paradise City. With that out of the way, grab your plane ticket, and let's travel. Our first stop on this tour takes us to lovely Yokohama, Japan. More realistically, right into the water of Yokohama Bay. Welcome to Special Stage Route 11 in Gran Turismo 3. Special Stage Route 11 is a city street racecourse set at night in what appears to be some highway system in Japan. The track didn't have much going on in the original game, aside from a double chicane that loved to screw people up. Mercifully, its iteration in GT3 removed the double chicane while providing some lovely nighttime scenery. The thing is, this track doesn't exist in real life. It was created exclusively for Gran Turismo. Why did I jump to the conclusion that it's in Yokohama? I came to that conclusion because of the architecture. To the geographic east is what appears to be the Yokohama Bridge, which is the first thing you'll see on the main straight. To the west is the Ferris wheel of Yokohama Cosmo World Amusement Park, seen when on the infield chicane. Speaking of which, the closest area I could find that resembles the infield is Yamashita Park. However, that area is mirrored from what's in Yokohama on Route 11. A later section has racers charging above dockyards, to which there aren't any of that altitude in such close proximity to the Cosmo World Ferris wheel. This leads me to believe that if Route 11 were to exist, it could only work if it was in the middle of Yokohama Bay. In the water. Racing game developers making an amalgamation of real-life parts over a fake track is nothing new, and our next course exemplifies that. We continue our trip in the land of the rising sun by moving into the shadow of the almighty Mount Fuji. Outside the town of Fujimi in Nagano Prefecture, we move into one of Japan's infamous mountain passes. If you're a racing game aficionado, chances are you're familiar with toge racing. And Forza, an American racing game, wanted to tap into that. The Fujimi Kaido course in the Forza Motorsport series takes place along the mountain passes of Japan, ending within the town of Fujimi, Nagano. But in a similar vein to Special Stage Route 11, the track itself is fake. I'm not the most cartographically inclined, but I'm pretty sure Mount Fuji isn't supposed to be that close to Fujimi. The geography of the track is inspired by the mountain passes, and they're all jumbled together to make an original track for Forza. While there are multiple small lakes within the mountainous regions, there's no direct match for what lakes are seen on the track. And there's no part of Fujimi where Mount Fuji is that close. Okay, maybe it would appear that close if your depth perception wasn't very high, but the point is that Fujisan is big, but not that big. Also, did you know the name Fujimi indicates that it's a place where Mount Fuji can be seen? There are at least 2 other towns sharing the name Fujimi in both Saitama and Gunma. And lastly, some food for thought. If Fujimi Kaido didn't exist, then Forza Horizon probably wouldn't exist. Fujimi Kaido is unique in that it's one of the few tracks, if not the only track in the motorsport series to feature traffic cars. It's also a track that's a combination of different geography that's based in reality. Lastly, it's a point-to-point race. It's the formula that Playground Games would use for the Horizon games, with maps that are abridged versions of real-world places with some original road structure for gameplay reasons. If you're still playing Horizon and are enjoying some drift sessions down La Gran Caldera in Mexico, think Fujimi Kaido in the Motorsport series. We return stateside to Washington State in the familiar Puget Sound. With this next track, it actually used to exist, but not anymore. Welcome to Seattle Circuit and Gran Turismo. With the release of Gran Turismo 2 in 1999, Polyphony Digital were interested in building tracks based on real-life street layouts. Some cities would feature race courses like Belle Isle in Detroit or more recently the F1 circuit in Las Vegas. However, GT2 asked, what if? Seattle has never hosted any street circuit, so Polyphony wanted to see what a hypothetical Seattle circuit would look like. At the time, it was a 1-to-1 replica of the real streets of Seattle. It featured many notable buildings and landmarks like Smith Tower, the Seattle Lighting Building, King Street Station, T-Mobile Park, and the former King Dome, all starting along the shoreline of Alaskan Way. The circuit got a graphical makeover in 2001's Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, looking more realistic than ever. But a lot can change in 25 years. Or hell, even 2 years. While most of the streets seen in the GT games of old are still around, some of them are not. The old Kingdom was demolished in 2000, with the PS2 and PSP Gran Turismo games still featuring the former multi-purpose stadium. In its place rose what is now known as Lumen Field, home of the Seattle Seahawks football team. This is like the 3rd time it's changed its name. The 90-degree turns between T-Mobile Park and Lumen Field are non-existent, with the 90-degree turns intersecting the parking structure. You'd have to get on an overpass to get to this straight along Edgar Martinez Drive. Lastly, the Alaskan Way Viaduct, the multi-layer freeway seen at the first and last corners, was demolished in 2019, with it being replaced by the State Route 99 tunnel. Don't be sad that the freeway's gone. It was deemed vulnerable to collapse after inspections related to the 2001 Nisqually earthquake. Not only is it no longer possible to drive this layout IRL, but it's also illegal, since you'd be ignoring one-way signs and city ordinances. Do not attempt. If Seattle Circuit were to return in any future Gran Turismo game, the last sector would look dramatically different. Otherwise, most of the existing streets are still as they were back in 1999. Remember when I said I wouldn't pick a mishmash map? Well, I lied. This is Lakeshore from Need for Speed Unbound, a condensed version of the Chicagoland area. I'm a bit biased here because I traveled to Chicago 3 times in 2 years. It's a gem of the urban Midwest. Anyway, back to Lakeshore, it's a more compact version of the Windy City, primarily based on the Loop and the near north side. The city itself is bisected by the Lakeshore River, the equivalent of the Chicago River, and shares multiple landmarks with its inspiration. There's the L trains, the drawbridges, Marina City, the John Hancock Building, and even Navy Pier. The arrangement of these landmarks is similar to its real-life counterpart, but is rearranged to not make it a one-to-one copy. For instance, the location of the Navy Pier equivalent is above the river where the near north side is. The city of Lakeshore itself is much smaller than Chicago in order to flesh out the other major areas of the map. The shape of the river is identical to the real thing, with it branching off to separate the west side, near north side, and the loop. Notable omissions to the city of Lakeshore include Soldier Field, Willis/Sears Tower, Millennium Park, and the entirety of the north and south side. Where exactly did Yaz get her baseball jersey if there's neither a Comiskey nor Wrigley? Lakeshore is strongly evocative of the Windy City, but is by no means an accurate representation of Chicago. And if you're new to Unbound, you probably won't have time to do sightseeing because of the campaign's hand-holding and constant police pressure. If you want a real-world place to be as far-fetched from reality as possible, look no further than 1990s Sega racing games. Colorful, almost cartoonish, and wild. In Sega Super GT's Expert Course, you may see the Colosseum, but that's about as close to being in Rome as the game lets you. The Roman Colosseum is just behind the starting line and you can drive through it. I just don't know how it connects to any part of Rome. The Colosseum doesn't have any roadways leading through it, thankfully, and very little of the surroundings bear any resemblance to the city of Rome. A castle? Mountains with a bridge overhead? Sure, it looks European, but it has as much to do with Italy as the invention of what we know as pizza. Not even the cheesy FMV in the arcade game's attract mode is true to the real deal. The area does look more like Rome than the game, and there's even a sign that says Colosseum. But the Colosseum in its current state has no grass field to drive through, and even less realistic is Jackie Bryant from Virtua Fighter driving his red supercar through it and causing all the bricks to fall. But I love this FMV, it screams 1990 CG with its simplistic look, low frame rate, and tacky dissolve transition at the end. If you wanted realism, Gran Turismo returns to scratch that itch. Similar to Seattle Circuit, the original Rome circuit used in GT2 and GT3 is taken from a real-life street layout. The Colosseum is visible but cannot be driven through, and even gets things like the rock wall right. But like Seattle Circuit, it's not legally possible to drive this route because of the one-way street near said rock wall. Sega racing games were rarely about realism in the 90s, with Sega taking, a few liberties to make their track fun and memorable. Polyphony Digital went in the exact opposite direction, trying to recreate a part of Rome as close as possible while also making an engaging technical track. They actually made 2 other tracks set in Rome, with Rome Night, exclusive to GT2 and rarely seen, and Circuito di Roma in GT5 and GT6. The revised Rome circuit borrows one section from the old course, that being the long straight and the turn at the Colosseum, while being a completely new course. I'm only scratching the surface of pseudo-realistic racetracks. Some of them took parts of the surrounding area and blended them together. Some took a few creative liberties with their source, and others were so real that you'd wonder why it never became a real street circuit. Do you know of any other fake tracks set in the real world? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, this is your reminder that we can't have nice things, especially if pedestrian bridges have blocked visibility because you're too poor to buy a ticket. Capitalism. Squiddy the Kid signing off. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz.